Hello, I'm Paulo Rocco, and this is Reprint, brought to you by the Temple News, your in-depth look into the stories you need to know about. This week, I speak to news freelancer Aubren Villasenor about a certification Temple received for its efforts in mental health on campus. Then I speak to Features Editor Bayleh Alexander about a new Temple campus bar and restaurant that is going to be opening up by November 4th. You wrote a really great piece for this print edition about some of the recognition that the university has gotten for some of the mental health measures that they've taken. Do you want to just do a quick rundown of what that was all about?
Thank you. So the Temple University very recently was recognized as a certified suicide prevention campus within the state of Philadelphia, within the state of Pennsylvania. So the point of the piece was really just to go over what does it mean to be a certified suicide prevention campus and to outline some of the efforts that the university has been taking to improve overall student wellness and promote a positive culture around mental health on campus.
Yeah, for sure. So what does it mean to be a certified institution in that realm?
Yes, so to be a certified suicide prevention institution, university or another institution of higher education has to submit a suicide prevention plan to the state of Pennsylvania, and that plan has to have 6 requirements. So some of those requirements include having crisis services available 24/7, having the crises line posted throughout campus, as well as other mental health resources throughout the campus, as well as having a post-intervention plan in place so that in the event of a student suicide were to occur, that the university were to have a well-thought-out plan on how to react to that situation to provide support to the campus community.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and is there any perks that the university gets or any, additional help or resources the university gets from the state because of the certification?
There are currently no other perks that the
Okay,
university gets other than being able to say that they're certified.
got you. And what kind of new investments has the university made into mental health and well-being?
Yeah, so I was speaking with the director of the Tuttleman Counseling Center, Andrew Lee, and he told me about some of the initiatives that the campus was recently starting to try and roll out. And one of those was the program called Together All. So Together All is very similar to Reddit. It's created and it's available 24/7. It's an anonymous program where students who may be struggling,
Yeah.
they can post online, say they're struggling with their body image and they want to be able to connect with students who are their age, but do it so anonymously. They're able to make online anonymous posts where other people can reply to those posts. So it's similar to like an online forum, only it's in a protected environment, of course.
Right.
Institutions have to enroll into it. And this program also extends beyond Temple University. So other schools have enrolled into it. There's about 1 million users per se.
Wow.
So then another initiative that the college has created is the creation of crises counseling hours. So in the event that a student has to speak to somebody and they're having a crisis, they can just walk into the Tuttleman Counseling Center during some posted hours, which I believe are 1 to 3 on business days. So if somebody's having a crisis, they don't have to wait for an appointment. Though that being said, they wanted to make it very clear that there is no wait time for regular ongoing appointments, but for crisis services, you can be seen immediately.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. On the all together thing, that really stood out to me. I thought that was really cool. I had never heard of it. Has it been successful thus far? Have people been using it? And what kind of conversations are going on that platform?
Yeah, so there's, as I said, there's been about 1 million
Yeah.
active users. Andrew didn't go into specifics about what conversations are specifically taking place on them. I assume for privacy reasons,
Right.
but we can assume that with 1 million active users, that people are really connecting with each other, and it's really created to combat this feeling of loneliness, this feeling of hopelessness, because yes, while crisis services from 1 to 3 on a business day are
Yeah.
convenience, typically people might not be having a crisis during
Right.
those very specific hours. So it's created for when it's 2 in the morning and you really don't know who to text. Your friends are asleep. You don't want to bother them. And you really don't feel like getting on the phone to talk to a counselor. And you just want to talk to somebody who relates to you. So those are some of the conversations that we can speculate are being had on those platforms.
Awesome, yeah. And you also mentioned in the article Temple being a JED campus. Can you explain what that is exactly?
Yeah, so a JED campus is part of the JED Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So JED stands for JED, and the foundation was created in the late 90s by a couple who lost their child to suicide. So the JED program focuses on active bystander intervention. For example, I was speaking to the president of Active Minds, and they talked about their ASK training, which is acknowledge, seek support, and keep in touch, if I remember correctly. And it's really it's really taking an active approach to suicide prevention, asking somebody, are you going to take your own life? Are you considering suicide? It helps break the barrier, and their goal is to help dispel some of the myths about suicide, because people might be afraid to ask somebody if they're going to harm themselves, because they're like, I don't want to give them that idea. So the Foundation really focuses on that education aspect of teaching people what has statistically and psychologically worked in preventing suicides and helping people feel less alone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in what aspects is the university maybe still falling short on things that they could do better? I know for in one way you mentioned the article that communication and actually getting the word out about these resources is kind of one way they've realized themselves that they're falling short a little bit.
Yeah, so an area for growth, especially, and certain areas that are falling short are definitely that communication aspect. I was very pleased to learn that the Tuttleman Counseling Services Center had just hired a social media manager, but I think it's been a little bit long
Hmm.
for that to happen. I think that that should have happened a while ago, though I'm glad that they're taking charge on that now. Another way is supporting students of color and international students.
Yeah.
For example, I touched upon it briefly in the article, but specifically within Asian cultures and Southeast Asian cultures, the topic of mental health is considered taboo. If you take a look at Japan's work culture, for example, almost a toxic work culture, which is often applauded in the sense of productivity,
Right.
but people are inclined to ignore mental health issues. I come from a Southeast Asian family,
Hmm.
and the topic of mental health was barely considered. People would barely consider it, and people, when you would talk about it, it was very frowned upon. So making more concerted efforts to reach underrepresented and historically marginalized communities would be great, would be a very good place for the university to start investing, because right now the topics of mental health, they seem to be more common. Discussion appears to be more common within the Western world,
Yeah.
which is great. Like, we've made a lot of progress here, but how can we expand this reach into those underrepresented communities without it being, while avoiding the white savior complex that
Hmm.
often happens when those investments take place. So that fine balance. But I think just opening up the conversation and perhaps creating spaces for students of color to talk about their experiences with mental health within a safe place with other students of color and allies and campus partners would be very useful.
Yeah, for sure. And then not only that, I think, you can only do so much of like letting people know about the resources, but then it's also like stigmatized in their head sometimes to actually go out and use those resources. I think a lot of outreach could be done to actually encourage people to use them. Um, but yeah, I think my final question here is, I mean, yeah, big one here. I don't know how it passed my mind, but can you give any insight to people of if they need some resources, where can they go to access them?
Yes, that's a great question. My number one suggestion would be to reach out directly to the Tuttleman Counseling Center
Mhm.
services area. They're located right on campus. You can walk straight into the building during any of the business hours. Their business hours are posted, of course, they're traditionally 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But for example, say you're in a crisis situation and you just need somebody to talk to, there is always going to be a counselor available if you just call their number.
Okay.
So that's very important to recognize.
Now I speak to Features Editor Bayleh Alexander about Temple's upcoming campus bar and restaurant that's opening up by November 4th. The long-awaited Peabody is finally going to open in November, fingers crossed. So yeah, you wrote a story about it. Tell me a little bit about the history of that space. What was there before?
Yeah, so before the Peabody, there was the Draught Horse,
Mhm.
and that opened in 2001, and it's kind of been like a community watering hole for like that past 20 years. It closed down in 2021 after the pandemic. I think it was reported like it was receiving like 30% of previous revenue, and they just like couldn't restrike a deal with Temple after that.
Mhm.
So yeah, now it's been a couple years, and Temple really wants to have like another community bar restaurant experience that kind of has like this similar vibe and like that will like carry on a similar legacy. Like people who went to the Draught Horse 20 years ago still remember it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how is Peabody going to differ from the Draught Horse House? Is it going to just be like a similar bar, or what's it going to be like?
Yeah, so I never got to go to the Draught Horse.
Right.
It closed down my freshman year. But it kind of goes with like the vibe of like the rest of the bars that we have on campus, like Pub Web and Maxie's, that like sports bar vibe. I think the difference with the Peabody will be like the restaurant aspect. There's gonna be like a full restaurant with like American cuisine, and they have like a bunch of different drinks and like signature cocktails and like draft beer. So it'll kind of, I think the vibe it's gonna give is like restaurant by day, like college bar by night,
Right.
which is a cool dichotomy for like staff who want to use that as well and like
For
aren't
sure.
interested in like the college bar scene. So it kind of is for like everyone, which
Yeah,
I think is nice.
for sure. I mean, you kind of mentioned the article. They're going for like they said an upscale kind of more vibe, I guess. Is that like, I don't know, they mentioned too, to kind of like, I guess, market to like alumni too, to like reminisce
Right.
on their past years.
Yeah, he said upscale, and I think like when we talk about upscale, like upscale in comparison to like Pub Web Maxie's, like I think it like will be upscale for what it is, and like it's a newer build. Like we don't really have like a lot of like new build bars, and I think it'll be upscale in specific reference to like the restaurant aspect. I think there's like 150 available dining seats and like 40 bar seats, so it's gonna be pretty big, and with that, like having a full restaurant, I think will make it a bit more upscale than just like a typical bar.
For sure, for sure. I mean, what took so long for this to open? I mean, I know you mentioned the article, they prioritized Bagels and Co. opening rather than this. Why did they make that decision?
So, Bagels and Co. and the Peabody are run by the same hospitality management group, and I asked about that. I was like, why? Like, what was the triage there? And Bagels and Co. is a chain spread across, like, I think it's like Florida and PA. There's like multiple different locations, and it's not specifically designed for Temple students. It's just like on Cecil B. Moore is a convenient location for Temple students. But the Peabody, like down to its name, is for Temple. So it took a lot more to like get the details in there better and like name it the Peabody and like tailor it towards the Temple community. But Bagels and Co. kind of has like a more uniform brand, so it's easier to get that up and running than it was to get the Peabody up and running. And I guess they didn't maybe plan ahead to like make those two happen at the same time. So it did happen to be delayed a lot.
Okay. Yeah. And is Temple's involvement in this simply, renting out the space to the hospitality group, or is there more involvement into this?
Yeah, I don't know too much on the specifics of that. I just know Temple is working with this hospitality group to run it, and I know Temple does have involvement, but I don't know like the specifics on like who owns what and like who manages what.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, this was kind of like President Jason Wingard's like brainchild.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure some of that had to come into play too, I guess.
Yeah, I did ask about that a bit. And in the original articles that were like released in like 2021, 2022, like when the Peabody was like first announced to be opened, President Wingard was heavily intertwined with like the forming and planning of that. But the ultimate reason they gave for the delays was the Bagels and Co. opening at the same time.
Right.
So I would assume that the change of presidents had something to do with it, and like the administration like prioritizing what Temple needs at the moment, like finding a new president might take triage over the Peabody. So I think that definitely had something to do with it.
For sure. I mean, and how are students feeling about this? I figured that people would just be excited about a new spot to drink opening up around campus, but people actually brought some valid concerns as to why this is a real benefit to Temple students.
Yeah, I just did an article on like students getting like harassed on public transportation, and being a college that's like kind of located smack dab in the middle of the city. We don't really have a lot of bars near us. We have Pub Web and Maxie's, and then if you want to go to another bar, you have to go all the way into the city. And a lot of students are really happy that we like have another option on campus and something new or something fresh, like something that people could be excited for. I think people are really excited to like have somewhere close to campus that's like safer to access than like having to like spend money and like risk yourself going into the city. So people are really happy about that. And also just like a space issue. We know the Peabody will be crowded once it's opened. But with like, I think there's like 7,500 undergrads living on our campus and like 2 bars. Like we need more. So this is good.
For sure. I mean, do you have anything else you'd like to say on this story? Or?
Yeah, I think students have been kind of confused and like left in the dark on what's happening here, and like some newer students don't even know what the Peabody is. Like freshmen, sophomores have never even heard of it. So I'm really excited that this is opening and will be like a new community watering hole for students.
For sure. And maybe we can do like a poll. Like when it opens up, like best bars on campus.
Oh my gosh, it'd be cool to see like a month in, like if everyone's like, I'm only going to the Peabody now. Like that'd be really funny.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. Yeah. Thank you to Aubren and Bayleh for joining me on this episode, and make sure to check out all their work on the Temple News website. I'm Pablo Rocco, podcast editor for the Temple News, and this is Reprint.